Hello, everybody. Welcome to the April meeting of the Delaware Astronomical Society. So we got folks both here in the room and virtually here at home. So first thing, do we have any new members who'd like to introduce themselves? Either here in the room or virtually online? Don't think I see anybody. All righty.
Right here.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Please.
I'm Gene Topin. I live in North Wilmington.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Anyone else? All right. So first item of business, the AP SIG meeting. Bill, you want to announce that?
Yes, the IPCC meeting for April will be on Saturday at 7 p.m. and the announcement will go out over groups.io as usual, probably on Thursday. Don't have a special topic yet, but that's everything.
All right, great. And next item, Mary, you want to talk about the book club?
Yes, next Thursday on the 28th at 7 p.m. via Zoom, the DAS Book Club will be meeting to discuss The Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield. It's Chris Hadfield's first foray into fiction, and he, of course, is a famous NASA astronaut. We selected the book to commemorate the 50th anniversaries of Apollo missions 16 and 17. Matt Brabowski will be leading the meeting. I'm not certain if he's on with us. Is Matt here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. He'll be leading the meeting. There's a possibility we may have a NASA ambassador joining us, but that's in the works. In May, we will be reading Seeing in the Dark, How Amateur Astronomers Are Discovering the Wonder by Timothy Ferris. I highly recommend the book to everyone in the DAS because it is a veritable ode to amateur astronomers and the role that they're still playing in the world of astronomy in spite of professional astronomers. And in June, we'll be reading the autobiography of John Brashear, and Bart Freed, who is the president of the Antique Telescope Society, will be leading the meeting. He's been writing a biography of John Brashear for the past 30 years. And I hope that everyone who is very involved in actual hardware, telescopes, lenses, will consider reading the book, which is free and available online, and join the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item, we're going to be having a Mount Cuba workday next Saturday, April 23rd, starting at 10 a.m., going to 2 p.m. So anyone who can, I would definitely encourage you to come out, help us give back to Mount Cuba. You know, Mount Cuba gives us this nice facility to have our meetings and to have our observatory and all the great things that we do here. So, you know, it's our chance to give back and do some work around the grounds, doing some gardening work or whatever they need done around here. We'll send some email reminders later this week, but I definitely would encourage you. I'll definitely be there. Jeff's going to be there. Dave's going to be there. We're going to have a good old time. Hopefully lots of other people. Greg's going to be there.
Pizza and drinks too.
Pizza and drinks for anybody who comes.
And
awesome.
There's going to be some yard work, maybe some mulching and such. Kim had said if people have some wheelbarrows or shovels or rakes that they could bring out. Mount Cuba only has a limited amount of that stuff. So obviously, if you don't have any of those things, don't use that as a reason not to come. But if you do have some extras, that'd be great if you could bring them as well.
That'd be awesome. We'll send an email later this week about that event. Next item, Sydney, I'm going to turn this camera around for you. And you can be like, maybe not.
All right.
Is that okay? Here, I'm just going to kind of hold it, I guess.
Let's stick that together there.
There you go.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. As you all know, every couple of years, we have an election, and the positions up for election is president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And this night is actually the last time that's opportunity you have if you're thinking of nominating somebody or yourself Tonight's the last chance you have in mentioning it. Either pass me a note or send me an email at astronomy@yahoo.com. If you want to be, in running for president, vice president, secretary, or treasurer. And after this, we're going to close it and we're going to start voting on May 1st. And I'll be sending the ballots out starting May 1st, and we'll close on May 30th. And that's about it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Anybody have a last minute nomination?
Yep.
No? All right. Let me see if I can figure out how this was on here. Is it
It
just
was
kind of
just
set?
sitting.
It's just that's the problem. It was just kind of sitting.
I was surprised. I'm glad that you guys have that, but I'm surprised it came off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have tape here.
Would this
Somebody
be,
have tape?
would this be a,
That'll fall off for
Yeah.
sure. No. Oh, I think I got it. Oh, it's too low. You got tape? You got tape? Right there. Awesome. Problem solved. All right, we're good. Okay, next item. We discussed at this last meeting that we're going to have a picnic on June 4th. And it's going to start at 12 p.m. We'll send lots more details out, but it's going to be free to DS members. We're going to have some pork,
well,
Some type of.
yeah.
some type of food, and it's going to be provided for us. And then also it's going to include a potluck portion, so you can bring your own entrees as well. But a lot of it's going to be provided. And then anything else to say?
No, I mean, details will follow, but again, the DAS will be providing, let's say, the main food and drinks. And we'll encourage people if they want to bring sides and or desserts. So yeah, it'll be here at Mount Cuba, starting at noon, running until, I guess, the last person leaves.
Great. And then also, about 2 weeks ago now, we did a major clean out of the loaner scopes, and we've been working for the last few months to get this stuff ready to go so that people can buy stuff. And so we're hoping this summer, we can have a number of get-togethers and people can start borrowing equipment. If you're interested in borrowing a Dob this evening, you can definitely do that. If you're interested in borrowing a refractor, if you're interested in borrowing a scope, just let us know and we can facilitate that. Anything else to add, anybody? All right, then Jeff, we can proceed.
All right.
Let's close this down.
All right, hi, everybody. Jeff Lawrence, programming chair. So we've actually been slightly introduced to tonight's speaker already. I'm not sure how well it came over Zoom, but before the meeting started, we were playing some music. And that music was actually created by tonight's speaker. I am being a little bit mysterious here. We will sneak up on the full details, but the music was produced or made by an artist named Foxanne, which is the secret identity of tonight's speaker. Tonight's speaker is Chelsea Gohd, who is joining us from Los Angeles. Chelsea writes on astronomy and other science topics for space.com. And we came across Chelsea when Eric actually forwarded to the club through the groups.io an article written by Chelsea, and just got digging. And then Rob had said, hey, this might be a good speaker. And it was really, really awesome that Chelsea was able to join us tonight to talk about some stuff that she's been doing. So as I said, Chelsea is a science and astronomy writer for space.com. And she actually had a really unique opportunity. I don't know if this will come up in the talk, but we'll maybe hit it in the Q&A. She participated in a simulated Mars mission where I guess they stuck her in a bubble on a mountain somewhere for some amount of time and, see how long it took until everybody started killing each other. But anyhow, I'll stop rambling. Chelsea, the floor is all yours. And
1 second, let's try and turn this around.
yeah.
And then we should mute everybody else.
Oh, yeah. So that's right. A couple of ground rules per usual. I will be muting everybody except for the speaker, of course, in order to keep the nice flow of the talk. Chelsea has requested that if you do have questions and want to put them in the chat, I don't know if she'll be monitoring the chat. We're obviously not going to be able to, but maybe there'll be some moments throughout her talk that she'll pause for questions, or certainly she'll be open to questions at the end. But I believe Chelsea's preference was to maybe not be, interrupted during the talk with questions, but we'll certainly have ample opportunity for questions at the end of the talk. So either, note down any questions or throw them in the chat, and we'll certainly get to those.
Mute everybody real quick. And we unmute.
still talking over here,
Yeah. Okay. And can we do it? Sometimes can we get Chelsea? You want to make sure the audio is coming through for you? Good.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
That's coming out.
Good.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. And anything else, or should I take it away?
It is all yours.
Excellent. Yeah, and I figured, I wasn't sure how this was going to go Zoom wise / in person, so I wasn't sure how it would be easiest to answer questions, but as they come through, or if they don't, no pressure. But yeah, as Jeff mentioned, I'm Chelsea. I write about space and science for space.com. I've done that for a number of years. My background is in biological sciences, but I have a deep love for space that's led me here. And yes, nobody killed each other in the bubble. So if that was your question, nobody killed each other. But I'm going to be talking a little bit about kind of what science communication in astronomy and space kind of looks like, why we do it, how we do it, and kind of how other people can get involved and do science communication in space. I'm sure for some of you, being astronomers, being enthusiasts, this might be, you already know it, you already do it. But I hope that at least it's interesting, if not informative. So I've got some slides I'm going to share, as well as some images, and I'm just going to talk through it. All righty. Let me know if when I start sharing, you can no longer hear me. I hope that you can.
Looks good.
All righty. Huzzah. Cool. So just kind of the science and art of communicating the cosmos, because science communication, there's a lot of science to it, but there's an art to it as well. So what is it? Why do we do it? And how do we do it? These are the basics. What is it? Obviously, the most self-explanatory part of my presentation. Oh no, slides. Come on, slides. All right. So, obviously this is the most self-explanatory part of this science communication. It's people communicating science through writing, video, photography, etc. But as I mentioned here at the bottom, you don't have to be a full-time professional science communicator to be a science communicator. I think that the vast majority of science communicators, it is not their main or even part-time job. I think that, a lot of people are just really passionate about science and they want to get it out there. So yeah, it's definitely a growing field professionally, but I think that in general, with new avenues like social media and with more and more access to digital articles and things like that, I think that science communication as a whole, whether it's professionally or just for fun, is growing quite a bit. So why do we do it? So the main reason is because space is amazing. I write for space.com, and we're all here at DAS because we love astronomy, we love space. So why not share it? I am curious. Feel free to comment in the chat if you do know what this image is or where this image came from. No pressure, no time to look it up on your phone. Giving it away, the red nebula is NGC 2014, near to our eyes, the blue nebula NGC 2020. And they are in this very, very large star forming region. And this image was captured by Hubble and shared for its 30th birthday just a couple of years ago. Now, I added this in here, one, because it's a beautiful, incredible image, but also because Hubble is an incredible and amazing science communication tool. Science communication, when we talk about space and astronomy, it's not always just me yammering on or articles that you might read, space telescopes are incredible instruments for SciComm, as we shorten it to. And as we saw recently in December, the James Webb Space Telescope just launched, and it is now at L2, and we're excited to see it get fully operational this summer. So pretty soon, we're going to have another amazing tool out there, gathering data and taking incredible images. Now, I talk about Hubble being an amazing science communication tool because before Hubble was doing what Hubble does best, we had an idea of what space looked like and what was out there. But I think that getting to see it, I think it makes it real. It makes it a lot more real for a lot of people. And I think that, being astronomers, you probably have a feeling of that as well. Your first moment of when you saw Saturn's rings through a telescope, when you see other people look through a telescope and see things in space with their own eyes for the first time. I think that, obviously our Earth-based telescopes, but, this advanced space telescope technology, getting to see things for yourself is a powerful tool. You don't need to say anything about it. It really speaks for itself in so many ways. All right. So why is it so important? I think that obviously space is amazing is the main reason, but there are, other reasons as well. One being accessibility, right? Astronomy and space, we love them. We love learning about them and talking about them, but everyone should be able to learn and enjoy space, right? Astronomy should be for everyone. I love it so much that I want everyone else to be able to enjoy it the way that I do. Additionally, when we talk about progress in science and in space, gaining and encouraging an interest in astronomy in all people can inspire curiosity in other STEM fields or in other space sciences, and it pushes us forward. SciComm, as you'll probably hear me shorten it to a number of times so I don't keep saying science communication over and over and over. It has the power to get the general public interested in science. People who maybe didn't even really care about their science classes in high school, they can get interested in science, and public interest can be an incredible driver in research getting funded, in government support. So, basically shortening that, if people care about the science will continue. So, while the passion drives my and other people's want to share science in space, it also serves a really important purpose to get the public's understanding and support. And I added here at the bottom, one of my favorite examples of this is a Star Trek example. And obviously Star Trek is science fiction, I know that. But it has inspired a lot of interest in science and space over the years. And it's inspired a lot of very real life science research and technological innovation. Just by getting people interested in the general concept of space travel, of strange new technologies, of thinking outside the box, has led to very real progress in science and tech. So that is always a lot of fun. All right, so some of the challenges that are present in astronomy science communication, making it accessible, making sure everyone can access it. Sorry, my computer is slower than I want it to be. So the intimidation factor, right? Or the white coat effect. The white coat effect is something that's often talked about in the medical field, where, when you're talking to a doctor and they have the white coat on, that you're not 100% truthful with them, or you're nervous or intimidated because of that kind of, air of whatever it is, whether it's some kind of social superiority or intellect, anything like that. It can be very intimidating. How many times in your life have you heard someone say, oh, that's cool that you like space, that you like science, but I'm just not that good at science. I was never good at it, never good at math, just not my thing. And I think that especially astronomy and the space sciences are the most susceptible to this. For some reason, people assume that they just are not capable of understanding it or of getting involved. Even if getting involved is just looking through a telescope and being curious, there's that barrier there, that intimidation where they hesitate because of how people are socialized, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a main challenge in getting to people and communicating science to them. And there's also a history of exclusion in science and astronomy. We see this in all STEM fields. There's been exclusion throughout history of marginalized groups. There's been a lack of access to education, to resources, support materials. Basically, everyone has not been able to get involved in the same way throughout history. Sorry, my throat's dry. I got my water with me. And I just included a couple of small statistics here just to share along with that information. My arrows are not going as fast as I am, but it is something that scientists and social scientists actually continue to study over the years, because we know that it's true, and we want to hopefully see that progress and change as we hopefully do our jobs right and get more and more people excited about science, excited about space. So how do you do it, right? We have all these challenges. We want to do it right. How do we do it? Man, these arrows are slow. This dang computer. So my main piece of advice, which I am also always taking advice. I think that if you're not constantly learning and you're in any kind of field of science, you're not doing it right. But my main piece of advice is always keep it simple, right? If you can explain a difficult science concept to a young child and have them understand it, I think that means that you understand it well. I would avoid overusing jargon. A lot of times when I've unfortunately seen this firsthand. I've seen especially scientists who don't see the point in science communication as a field. They use a lot of impressive jargon, big scientific words. But while the person speaking might be excited because they like talking about the research, they think it's a cool word, this is the most correct way to say this, the most exacting way to say what they want to say, it often just alienates the person they're talking to. So instead of getting them to understand what they're talking about, they've just made them feel like they're too dumb to understand it, which of course they're not. Now, kind of along those same lines, saying things like obviously before sharing information is definitely not something I try not to do, but I do see it, and I think this is thrown around very casually. Obviously, this is the case, obviously there, this planet has this type of atmosphere, obviously we've done this in space flight. But I think that it's always, safest to assume that the people you're talking to might just not know everything that you do, and that's okay. And so coming at it, just kind of blank slate, I think people are usually more receptive to receiving that information. And making comparisons that might not make sense. For example, baseball metaphors are not all that helpful for everyone. Especially when we're talking about difficult science, it can be really useful and a great tool to use, metaphors and try to compare things to other things that people might already be familiar with so that they can have a better grasp on what you're talking about. But when you're doing that, you have to be careful and you have to know your audience. And that leads me into yes, these are great things to do if you want to communicate science well column. And the first thing is think about your audience. Who are you talking to? Am I talking to a classroom of third graders, or am I talking to a bar full of science enthusiasts at 1 a.m? Very different crowds, very different crowds. So when you're going into something, whether you're just making a post online or you're doing a whole presentation, think about who you're talking to. Think about who's going to read it, who's going to be seeing what you're posting, and who's going to be listening. My next point is just break it down and break it down again, continue breaking it down. This kind of jumps back to what I was saying before. Try not to assume that people understand as much as they probably do. I think that breaking things down to their simplest pieces is always the best way to get the most difficult science concepts across. I used to work at the Natural History Museum, and I would give these live lectures about different types of science back in my East Coast days that I do miss, though LA is nice. And oftentimes I would get groups of people where I would have a classroom from an elementary school, and then I would have adults with science backgrounds all sitting in front of me in the same audience. And, it doesn't matter who you're talking to. If you don't know your audience, if your audience is all jumbled up, if you can break everything down into its simplest components, then you can get things across. And I think that that's especially true in astronomy. Things can get complicated and weird really quick. We can say, oh, of course, everyone knows what a black hole is, but black holes are really weird. And things like that, really breaking down what are these objects we're talking about? What is this portion of the sky that we're discussing? Where did it get its name? What is a star forming region? It seems self-explanatory, but breaking things down never hurts. And bringing me to my next point, there are no stupid questions. I'm not the first person to say this by any means, but I think that just creating an atmosphere, whether that's your Twitter page where you like to talk about astronomy, or your family reunion where everyone is always asking you questions about space, whatever the circumstance might be, creating an atmosphere that welcomes curiosity, that welcomes questions, is always going to be an environment where people are most receptive to learning information. If your audience already thinks that you're coming into this lecturing them, or you're so far ahead of them at the get-go, at the beginning, that they can't even catch up, they're going to glaze over. They're not going to retain the information. So if you really want to share it, if you want the people you're talking to hear what you're saying and understand why you're so excited about it and why it's so interesting, you have to welcome all questions. I remember when I worked at the museum, I was doing a lecture about microbes, and this was all the way at the end of this whole exhibit, all about microbes, different types of microbes. And at the end of my talk, I had a kid come up to me and they were like, hey, I'm kind of embarrassed to ask this, but I just don't know what a microbe is. And I was so embarrassed because that they would feel badly that they didn't know, because at the end of all of that, if I did my job right, they shouldn't be asking that question. So, it's about really welcoming those questions and understanding, that it's okay if people don't know, because if I'm doing my job right, they should. And also being honest with yourself as a person, and being self-critical is always helpful in every field. My next point here is keep up with new research papers, missions, discoveries, etc. James Webb, just got to L2. This is a great time to start if you're not keeping up with what's the latest in exciting discoveries in space. But if you want to get involved in being a space science communicator, even just casually, if you want to be more involved in that, if you want to be better at that, or if you just want to be more involved in the research and science community, I think that just continuing to learn and be a part of the new research that's happening is so important, because there is so much research happening all the time. Every day, I go through different journals, and there are so many incredible, inquisitive, weird new papers getting published all the time, and keeping up with the latest science is awesome. And that is just kind of on the same note as the next point. Never stop learning. Never assume that you know everything, even if it's a topic that you are an expert in. Everyone can and should, always be learning new things. I think that's true in all of the sciences, but especially in space. There are so many missions and research projects happening all of the time. What we knew last year is different from what we know this year. So, always be open to changing what you know, changing your opinion based on new information. That's science. And then lastly, be yourself. In science communication, there can sometimes be a pressure to communicate in a certain way or take on some kind of character or persona to communicate, to become Bill Nye, but there's only one Bill Nye, unfortunately. And if you want to get involved in it and you want to reach people, authenticity is really, people respond to authenticity more than anything, even if they're on a Zoom call mispronouncing the word authenticity. All right. And use all the tools at your disposal. There are so many different ways to communicate science these days. And I know that not everyone will be super well versed in social media and newer platforms, but I know that at least in the last few years, I've spoken to a lot of scientists who, they kind of turn up their noses a little bit at social media as a tool in science. It's not just for sharing funny videos with your friends, though that is wonderful. It's not just fun and distraction. It really can be an extremely powerful educational tool. Now, to be successful with it, it doesn't mean you have to use every single app that comes out, because there's 1,000,001 and tomorrow there's going to be 1,000,002. But just kind of learning and growing and adapting to using it on whatever way you're most comfortable. Because even though it might feel silly and like, some kind of toy for children, which in some cases it is, it really can be powerful. I mean, there are a lot of people, who have reached out to me, who I've gotten messages from, who have only gotten into science and astronomy and have only gotten interested in space through social media, through following people talking about the latest missions to launch, the newest science coming out. So it might seem silly to some, but it really can be a powerful tool. And think outside the box. If you want to get involved in science communication in any way, there really is an endless list of ways to do that. Now, you can do that by engaging with live astronomy events, which we are all doing right now. So excellent. You can work with virtual clubs, follow different astronomers, scientists, science communicators online, see how they share their work, see how they talk about it. If you're curious about it, you just peruse, look out into the ethers and see how people are doing it. And simply just, share what you find is interesting and just follow where it takes you. At the end of the day, science communication is just sharing cool science with other people. Cool things are happening in space, and I'm lucky enough that it's my job to tell people about it. But at the end of the day, that's really, really all that it is. So if you do want to get involved, just don't forget to enjoy it, because it's supposed to be fun. And if this was kind of a boring lecture, then I have some photos that I want to share just kind of through my journey as a science communicator and some of the more fun and exciting things that I've gotten to participate in as a space and science communicator and writer. Though I will warn you, 99.9% of the time, I am at this desk sitting in front of my computer, writing and editing and doing interviews and transcribing calls. So it might look exciting, but I promise you it is usually very boring. All right, so this is a photo of a launch that I went to at Kennedy Space Center. This was back in 2019 in December. This was Boeing's Starliner OFT-1 flight test. This was their Crew Dragon, so to speak, their crew capsule that they have been designing to take astronauts to and from the space station. This was a really beautiful sunrise launch, but space is hard, as NASA's kind of new slogan has been, and things don't always go according to plan. And again, yeah, it was really beautiful. You can kind of see it there off in the distance and the trail that it left behind. This is the news center. I believe it was about 4 a.m. We all got there about 1:30 or 2. If you want to get into science communication and you are interested in the space side of things, be prepared to not sleep. Launches happen all the time. And this is the Starliner crew. Now, they did not launch. They are set to launch on the first crewed Starliner launch. And these are 4 NASA astronauts. You can see on the left there is Sunny Williams. We have Nicole Mann. We have Mike Fink, and they were just kind of there excitedly taking part in the events. They were not launching, but thankfully they were not launching. Oh, this Mike Fink. These are just some fun photos sharing along the way. Astronauts can be very goofy. As you might know, everyone in space and science can be very goofy. Here, let me see if I missed one photo. Nope. And this is a different model of Starliner, and this is in the facility where they kind of build and develop them. But for anyone who follows space flight, this is kind of the aftermath, and it might look very boring, but when things go wrong, you can kind of see the worried looks on everyone's faces if you have better eyesight than I do. Essentially what happened is there was a bit of there were quite a few issues. I think the review board after the fact found about 80 issues that they wanted to fix before trying the flight test again. But what happened was the capsule was not able to dock with the space station and had to make an emergency landing out in the desert. And the entire Boeing crew, again, this was about 4 a.m, about 15 minutes after launch, the entire Boeing crew packed up and got on a plane to New Mexico to try to meet it in the desert. So it might look calm, but if you can see the worry in everyone's faces, it was quite chaotic and worrisome. Thankfully, there were no astronauts on board, but this being a capsule designed to carry astronauts, when things don't go according to plan, yeah, people were pretty concerned. Now, that's supposed to basically try again with the flight test this spring, I believe this May, so we'll see how it goes. This, oh God, this is a kind of small, fun version of a training device, a kind of small, user-friendly version of a piece of equipment that astronauts might train with to go to space. I did strap into it. I didn't puke, but I kind of regretted it, I'll be honest. This is at Spaceport America. And what you're looking at is basically a moon buggy, but it's a fake moon buggy. This was one of the vehicles used for filming in the movie Ad Astra, which I know has gotten mixed reviews from the astronomy community. I can see some thumbs downs there. Yeah, it's, I have my thoughts on it. If we have a movie review chat in the future, I'll share those as well. But I did think it was, at least fun how they did the moon chase scene, however, unrealistic. And this was just one of the moon buggies they used for filming, which was a lot of fun to go check out in the desert. This is a launch from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. So those of you in Delaware are probably very familiar with Wallops. I actually recently moved to California. I was in the tri-state area for the majority of my life. Jersey girl, I do have a lot of family in Delaware. And so I spent many years traveling back and forth to Wallops. And I didn't make a good enough note for myself, but this was with exactly which launch this was, but this was a cargo launch to the space station. And this happens all the time from Wallops. I believe like 3 to 4 times a year, kind of in an average year. And the company Rocket Lab even just set up shop at Wallops. So there's going to be even more launches. But yeah, a few times a year, they will send up food, supplies, science equipment, just the basics for the crew living on board the International Space Station. So if those of you who are in the room or those of you on Zoom who are also from Delaware ever get the itch and have not seen a live launch before, I definitely encourage you to go to Wallops. It's a really small facility. It's very easy to access. It's not as intimidating as Kennedy Space Center. It's not crazy or difficult to find. It's not expensive. You can just pull your car up on the side of the highway and watch something launch. It's really fun. This was kind of an interesting moment. So I'm holding a chocolate chip cookie in my hand on the left, and that is former NASA astronaut Mike Massimino to my right. And Mike was kind of just the spokesperson for this project, but essentially a very small startup company. It's a husband and wife duo. They started this company. They built the first oven in space. It's not the size of your regular kitchen oven, more like a very, very elaborate, very technical toaster oven, but it was designed specifically to move heat around in a way where it could fully cook through something on board the International Space Station, and they launched it and tested it and it worked. But the first thing they made was this exact type of cookie. It was delicious. I'm sure the crew loved it. Though very sadly, I did ask Mike, and he confirmed that because it was technically an experiment with the technology, they cooked the cookies, they baked them, but they weren't allowed to eat them because they had to send them back for testing. Whether or not there were any rogue cookies that didn't make it back, I did not get any information. This is just a little bit closer to the launch pad at Wallops. When you watch launches, it is not this close. That would be dangerous. But if you sign up for a NASA social, which I encourage everyone interested in space and science to do, or if you get involved with science communication and go as an official media person, you get to go really close to the launch pad. So getting involved in SciComm definitely has its perks. Even if it's not your profession, if you get involved over social media and you go to a NASA social, you get to peek a bit behind the curtain, see behind the scenes, and it's pretty cool. And again, yeah, this is one of the facilities where they basically build the rockets and put everything together at Wallops. This is the Horizontal Integration Facility, or the HIF. And so when you go in there, there are pretty strict protocol, especially with regard to taking photo and videos, because they have things that aren't quite built yet, things that aren't quite finished, aren't quite ready to be photographed, proprietary information and whatnot, especially because, you know, there are private companies that build things or contribute materials to these launches. But again, if you get involved and you end up at something like a NASA social event, you might be able to peek inside. It's really cool. Sir Richard Branson hanging out in the Virgin Galactic suit. This was just at an interesting event. These are models clearly modeling their new suit design. I just thought it was interesting because, you know, every company that's coming out, whether they're doing suborbital flights or something a little bit meatier, they have to have their own suit. And whether that's just a flight suit, whether that is a pressurized suit for something more elaborate, they have to have it fully designed and built in some way, shape, or form. And so it's always interesting to see when companies come out with their own spacesuits or suits, what those will look like, and what kind of extra features they try to add, especially when we're talking about companies like Virgin Galactic and Space Tourism, what perks they try to add to all of the gear because they are for profit. So that is always interesting. This is a much different suit. This is the XCMU. This is kind of an in development, but quite far along prototype of NASA's new pressurized spacesuit. And one of the spacesuit engineers is wearing it there at an event in Washington, D.C. and demonstrating picking up a rock, something that you would assume is very easy, but I'm sure wearing all that gear is no small feat. And again, that's a pressurized suit and a non-pressurized suit to the right, and to the left is former NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. I'm just posing here with what looks like an air freshener, but is actually a 3D printed miniature model of a Martian habitat. This is a New York-based company called AI Space Factory that, again, when we were based in New York, got to hop on over. And you might not believe it, but just about 3 blocks from Times Square and an office, this company is located. They have a bigger warehouse where they're 3D printing. And let me see if I have a photo of the printer in here. But basically, they have simulated lunar materials and Martian materials for these different purposes. And they are trying to learn how to 3D print with these materials so that foreseeably in the future, if we could send a 3D printer to a distant location like Mars, then it could use the materials there to build habitats or build things so that you wouldn't need to send both a printer and tons and tons and tons of heavy metal material because, as you know, with space flight, weight is everything when you're launching something to space. The more you can shave off of the weight of your payload, the cheaper it'll be, the easier it'll be, and usually the safer it'll be. So that's just a little look inside one of their smaller printers, though their warehouses, they are much larger, and they've built a couple of prototype habitats that are quite large. I actually think they, at some point in time, plan to start renting out one in the Adirondacks in New York. So if you ever want to stay at some kind of strange Martian habitat in the woods, I think they're working on that. And this is just a photo from the a presentation of the annual IPCC report. And this is something that I always like to ramble on when I'm given the space to ramble as much as I want, which people don't usually let me do because clearly I like to talk. Oftentimes when we're talking about space, I get a lot of, whether it's just to my face or in my Gmail inbox, a lot of people saying, well, why do we care about space? We have so many problems here on Earth. Climate change, right? Climate change is the biggest problem facing us in the world. It's going to affect everything. Health, wealth, every aspect of human being, it is threatening. But I think that what a lot of people who aren't already in the space world either don't know or forget is that a huge, overwhelming amount of our climate data is gathered from space. The reason that we're able to understand climate change and weather patterns, temperature changes on Earth is because we can see Earth from the vantage point of space. We can watch the migration patterns of different species all the way from space and see how they change as sea levels rise. The amount of information that we can glean because we have these little probes in orbit is incredible. So I just think it's always important to remind the people around us the power of space. It's not just cool and amazing, it's our best tool against climate change because it really is our best tool in understanding it. So this isn't a very interesting photo, but this was just from a presentation that I attended. Also from the presentation, I figured I'd add a little bit more excitement with the polar bear to the left. I understand this is an environmental presentation. It might be strange why there is a taxidermied polar bear present, but this happened at the Explorers Club, which is in New York, which is a very strange old world venue. In the upper levels, the upper levels of this very old, very mahogany building, you probably have an idea of it. There are animals that Teddy Roosevelt personally shot himself. So again, very old world, strange explorers building, but they often host, science panels such as this, but I thought it'd be a little bit of visual flair. Why not throw a polar bear in there? And again, kind of along those same lines, this is at the UN, and this was an annual talk about peace in space. And this was a few years ago now. You can see no one's wearing masks. This was all pre-COVID. But there is a lot of talk, especially now, about not just how we can remain peaceful in space, but as we go to the moon, as we go to Mars, as people start talking about mining asteroids, what that looks like when you're talking about actually doing it from a political perspective, from having all these new companies involved. So this is just kind of another weird corner of the space world that isn't often seen. And this was just a great panel. These are three hidden figures. I don't know if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures or how familiar you are with the women who really were an integral and crucial part of the Apollo program. But these are three women who did a talk the other year at the Smithsonian. And I was just lucky enough to hang out with them. You might most recognize to my left with the blonde hair, who has probably gained the most public notoriety, Poppy Northcutt, real name Frances, but Poppy to the world, Poppy Northcutt. She was the first woman to ever work in mission control. And at the time, her face was on the front page of every paper because, young, pretty, long blonde hair sitting in the middle of mission control. And she was the only one that looked like her. And so it's always interesting to get to talk to these hidden figures and talk to people who have been a part of space for longer than I have. And I also think that it is surprising to many people how young they are. I think that when we think about hidden figures, especially this younger generation, we think that the hidden figures of the Apollo age are, long gone and we're so far into the future, but this was not that long ago. And these women are still an active part of space and science. The Enterprise, this is at the Intrepid in New York, just a hop and a skip from Delaware, always a good time for a fun space day. This might seem like a strange slide, but again, another just weird little corner of the space world. This was from a conference that I spoke at directly after Shaquille O'Neal, not something I expected to do. I was speaking about space technology and internet satellites, and he was talking about technology in general as an investor. But again, just kind of a weird look into kind of, you might not expect who you'll find in the space world. The people who are interested in it and who might become interested in it might be a surprise to you. And so that's always fun. This is just a fun look inside the Hall of Meteorites at the Natural History Museum. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to get to contribute to a new installation in which they added some really incredible models and a number of interactive displays. To the right, I helped design some really great fun video games, and to the left is a lot more of just an informative panel with pages and pages and pages of text and information. Another just kind of look at what science communication can look like. It's not just me rambling on here or writing articles. Museums are evolving. The ways that we communicate science are evolving. This is, just Brainbar Budapest. This was a really interesting science and tech festival with May Musk on the left, not my greatest photography work, but that's Elon Musk's mother, May Musk, who is a dietitian with quite a bit of science training of her own accord, who gave an interesting look into kind of both, her life getting involved in science and then being the mother of Elon Musk in this day and age, something that I'm sure is quite strange. This was a wild experience. I got to fly on a parabolic flight, a zero-G flight in which we experienced weightlessness simulating zero gravity. Was it nauseating? I will answer that question right now. Yes. I would do it again in a heartbeat, but I'd do it with a lot more Dramamine. But that was a really incredible experience and definitely gave me a better insight into what it's actually like to experience weightlessness, because it doesn't feel like you're in a swimming pool or you're floating. It's a lot stranger, as we find with a lot of things in space. This was just the other week at NASA's JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab here in California. And this is the Psyche spacecraft. It's here in the clean room. And this is a really cool spacecraft because it's going to be sent out to what we think is a very metal-rich asteroid of the same name, Psyche. And we think that most likely, but again, we really don't know. We won't know until we get there, that the Psyche asteroid is, because it's so high in metal, they think it could be up to 90% metal, that it could be the core of what was once a protoplanet, and that what was left of the planet previously had been ripped away by some kind of event or process, and that what is left is just the core of this planet. And so we think that while we might be surprised if we find it something else, if it is this weird planetary core, by getting a look at it up close, we could be looking at something comparable to the Earth's core up close, or the core of other rocky planets. So it's going to be really interesting and very strange to see how they figure out how to build something to go to an object so strange. And these are kind of just funny, weird selfies, but to go into a clean room, everyone isn't just dressing like this for fun. This is a spacecraft that we're sending out that hasn't launched yet, that is going to be sent on a very delicate, expensive mission that has a lot of scientific hopes hanging on it. And, if you come in, you couldn't go in with any makeup, perfume, cologne, anything whatsoever, no jewelry. So going into the clean room, you really have to make sure that you are not going to leave any debris behind, that none of your jewelry rips a tiny hole in the glove and leaves any debris behind, because even though this is a, big, tough spacecraft, a tiny grain of a contaminant could potentially jeopardize some facet of the mission. So whenever they let anyone into the clean room, it is always a very controlled procedure. This is a fun side of the space world, as we are here tonight, kind of just having fun and chatting or listening to me ramble. This is an event called Yuris Night, and this just happened here in LA, and there was one in Florida, but they happen all over the world, because even though this was an officially scheduled one, people host their own Yuris Nights all over the world. I don't know if anyone here has attended one before or thrown one in their own homes, but it's every year on the anniversary of the first human space flight made by Yuri Gagarin. People get together and just celebrate human space flight and get together and party about it. And that's really the extent of it. This was just something that I was really grateful to do. So on the left, speaking at Yuris Night, is astronaut Cyan Proctor. Dr. Proctor is a geoscientist and a poet, and this past year she flew on an orbital mission, a private orbital mission called Inspiration 4. It was the first private orbital mission ever flown, and it was flown to benefit St. Jude. But she actually is a friend of mine, and she served as the full mission control for the analog Mars mission that I participated in. So she kept us all alive. And when she was preparing to launch to space, she offered to bring one of my songs that I had written with her to space to listen to while she was in orbit around planet Earth. And that is and will remain the coolest thing that's ever happened to me or in my life. So, you know, that's it. I've peaked, but she is really wonderful. She was also the first Black woman to ever pilot a spacecraft. She was the pilot for Inspiration 4, having had experience piloting different jets previously, and of course the crew trained rigorously for their mission. And on the right side are just some, you know, I did a little spacey music video to go along with the song, knowing it would go into space. And I was lucky enough that the Liberty Science Center in New Jersey let me shoot that there. They just did it because they thought it would be fun. They are a wonderful group of people. If you have not yet visited that planetarium, I highly recommend it. It's the largest in the hemisphere, and it's really a great time. This is a launch that I was just at last week in Florida. This was the AX-1 launch. Speaking of private astronauts, this is the first fully private astronaut mission to the space station. And they were supposed to undock and come home tonight, actually, but unfortunately the weather here on Earth had other plans, so they're going to be hanging out on the space station for a little while longer. Now, it has yet to be seen if they will have to pay more money because they will be on the station for longer, as they are paying passengers. I'm not quite sure yet, though one of my colleagues did email NASA and ask them just to see. Apologies for the lag. I fear it's my computer. Oh yeah, and lastly, I just wanted to share some photos from my life on Mars. So if you haven't heard of analog missions before, these have been a staple of space flight, human space flight training, and just space sciences since the Apollo era. The early Apollo astronauts, they went to Hawaii and they went to Iceland, and a number of other places that we consider kind of analogs to what we expected or could be on regions like the moon or Mars. And they did a lot of training, a lot of geological training, how to collect rocks in a challenging environment, how to, you know, test a spacesuit. A lot of technology is tested here. And so I took part in a 2-week analog Mars mission. And this was a full simulation in a dome on the side of the Mauna Loa volcano on the Big Island of Hawaii. And it was a full simulation. We had an airlock. We could not leave unless we were in a full head-to-toe spacesuit with the life support backpack and everything. And we could only eat the Martian food. However, we were there in 2020, and because of COVID supply shortages, our food shipment was not able to arrive. So our food options were limited. We also, our water broke, it was storming, et cetera, et cetera. It was a very fast lesson in when it comes to life in space, expect the unexpected. Things will go wrong, and that is the norm. So these are just some fun photos from that time. I'll try to explain them as I go through, though some might be more self-explanatory. This is a view from the habitat, looking outward onto the mountain, and you can see how red it is, how Martian it looks, and that's the iron oxide that is in the material on the ground, and that's the iron oxide is what gives Mars itself that red color. So it really felt like Mars. There was not a green thing in sight. That's the side of the hab, cool helmet. This is me and my crew. We were an all-woman crew, and we were there for 2 weeks in 2020. We were actually there during the 2020 presidential election, which, coming into a habitat where you will be sealed in for 2 weeks with 5 complete strangers in the middle of a pandemic during an election, certainly a gamble, but we all made it work and were the utmost of professional. This was my desk. Again, a lot of work in science and SciComm is sitting at a desk and writing and working. This was our sourdough experiment. The habitat is over 8,000 feet in altitude, and again, it's kind of strange inside the habitat. We actually have kind of air monitors making sure carbon dioxide levels do not get too high, because again, there are no windows. It's fairly sealed in. And so we were wondering how sourdough might survive on a mission like this. Blue pancakes and blue popcorn. We brought along with us, we were testing the viability of spirulina algae as a nutritional supplement. And so spirulina has this just naturally blue color. It's this algae, and when you dry it out and create a powder, you can toss it into any old thing and turn it blue. It doesn't change the taste. And it's still being studied as to how much it really changes the nutritional quality of something, but we certainly had a lot of fun with it. This was part of the first live animal experiment at high seas. In addition to serving as a documentarian, I was there to film a documentary. I also was the chief science officer for the crew. So this meant that I helped to support all of my crewmates' different science missions and research objectives throughout the mission. So this was my crewmate, Amanda Knutson, and she brought live fish with her. She flew there with them. I will tell you, not all of the fish made it, but she tried her damnedest. This is one of the fish. I don't know if this is one of the fish that made it. I'm sorry, but the fish did their best as well. This is some might say, revolting experiment, but this is an experiment that was actually originally started by a group of high school students and proposed to researchers living at high seas, and that as the missions have gone on at high seas, each new crew contributes. So essentially, it is a chemical cocktail in these small bottles, and the crewmates, we each added a little bit of our own hair to the concoction. And essentially, the chemicals break down the hair, and it is then diluted and used as compost for food that we might be trying to grow within the habitat. It seems gross, but if you just clean out your hairbrush, it's not too bad, though we did have one crewmate fully cut off a few locks of hair. I did not do that, but more power to her. And surprisingly, at least from studies that have been done so far, this compound actually does work as a pretty decent compost. Mark Watney in The Martian, if he'd have known, maybe he would have done this, but alas. This is a nice view out of our little porthole. This was really our only window to the outside throughout the entire 2 weeks. And because we faced a lot of storms, we were not able to do quite as many Mars walks as we'd planned for. So for a lot of the time, this was our only look out at the world. And 2 weeks might sound like a short time, but it can feel a little longer. This is a Martian that we found snuck into the habitat. We're not sure quite how, but proof of life on Mars, clearly. This was one of our innovative meals. Again, every single food item freeze dried or dehydrated, all shelf stable. The vast majority of our food items were shelf stable to at least 30 years. So what we're working with is probably pretty old, rehydrated Martian food. Another view out of the porthole at our cool Mars view. This is our table that we did everything at, and what I have set up here. Additionally, is my role as crew science officer. I helped to conduct and led what we called swab parties. So this was collecting data on what microbes live on the human body in analog Mars conditions. So what might be living on your toenails, behind your knees, et cetera, et cetera. This will be the only photo of the swab parties that I share, but it was definitely interesting, and the crew was not happy with me, but I was there for science. What can I say? It's a little look at our workstations, kind of messy, but we tried our best. This was a map. So when we went out on Mars walks, we had navigation devices with us and compasses, but this is kind of a map of the different lava tubes that had been mapped by previous missions for exploring. And for the Tolkien fans in the audience, you might notice a theme. There's a lot of Tolkien influence in how we have named things there. Obviously, these are not official names. This is one of many sites in Hawaii that there has to be a lot of kind of careful coordination with people who are native to Hawaii to the people who live there, so that it is not taking over, so that the science can cohabitate and kind of work alongside the people who live there. A look at our helmets and life support backpacks. They were pretty heavy. Our suits, and they are on those kind of scary looking things. Those are tubes that had air flowing through them. A Mars walk, I just kind of in my personal life, I like to run. I'm very asthmatic, but I like to run. And I would say that an hour-long Mars walk was similar to my experience running a half marathon, with all of the gear on you, trekking through all of the different debris and over the different types of lava rock. It was pretty exhausting. So we had to dry those things out. This is in one of the lava tubes. I have a GoPro strapped on me. My helmet's all fogged up, clearly sucking wind. But I would say that if I were to label my favorite thing about being on quote unquote Mars, it would be exploring the lava tubes. Being underground, climbing down into these lava tubes, which really climbing on your hands and knees, it could be quite claustrophobic. It is not for everyone. But it really felt so alien and Mars-like. And I like to point out that you can see a lot of this white material on the walls in some of these photos. And that is some of the material that there are a lot of researchers or research projects that have been ongoing for years from NASA Goddard and from other NASA-backed scientists into the microscopic populations living in places like these lava tubes. In fact, there have been missions that have either just partnered with NASA Goddard at high seas or that have run through high seas, because by studying the extreme microscopic life that can survive in these very remote lava tubes in very extreme conditions, scientists can get a better idea of what type of microscopic life may or may not live on places like Mars. This is on the surface. Yeah, I mean, it might look like we're on just a dusty trail, but with the clouds gone, it would be clear that, I mean, you could not see, there was not a piece of green that you could see really in any direction. This to my left was probably the coolest and most dangerous part of our trek. We had to walk very quickly along that corridor. You can see my crewmate Rochelle on right there, and we had to go one at a time just in case, because falling into there, let's just say that it's so deep and dangerous that we are not even really allowed to send drones flying down there on these missions, because it is more than likely that they will not return. I put on a fun concert for my crewmates. We got really bored and ran out of most of our power. So acoustic guitar and one lamp it was. This was just a funny photo that we took, and we pasted that on the outside of our porthole to our crewmates, because yes, our water pump broke a few days in. And we had a couple crewmates don spacesuits and go outside and try to fix it. Unfortunately, it was beyond repair. It was something that no one had broken it. It was a malfunction of the pump itself, and the pump had to be replaced. So we were without water for some time. Some quote unquote robotic drones dropped off a couple emergency gallons so we wouldn't, so we could survive. But when you are living in a place where all of the food is dehydrated, it is quite a challenge to be without water. Just photographing plants. The plants here are just babies. Now they're growing and now they are large. And that is the end of my presentation. I've probably gone on for way too long, but that's the end of my whole spiel. I just wanted to share some of those photos with you all. And now I'm hopping back in the chat if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns? I'm gonna check the chat.
Chelsea, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
So, how did you get into this line of work?
Kind of in a non-traditional way. I have colleagues that went to school for science writing, but when I went to college, I didn't know science communication was a field. I studied biological sciences and public health, took a lot of weird, gross infectious disease courses and epidemiology, and I did some research at Sloan Kettering. I dabbled doing a little bit of education, and I was trying to find my place in the science world when I got my first job at the Natural History Museum. And that first job was to essentially wrangle tarantulas with a headset mic on and a miniature auditorium and deliver lectures to the general public on arachnid biology while holding the live tarantula. And I got to kind of help write the script and tweak it and talk to all different kinds of people and answer questions live. And I was like, man, this is a lot of fun. Is this a job? Is it, is this more than just this one weird job? And I learned that, you could be a science communicator for your job. And I, continued to pursue that, through writing and other means, and it snowballed from there.
Cool. Obviously, for anybody on Zoom at this point, feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions.
If not, it's okay. Don't feel pressured.
So what's in the future? What's in the future for taking pictures of, we got launches coming up or anything?
Yeah, there's quite a bit coming up. It's exciting. This Saturday, Crew 4 is set to launch to the International Space Station. So that's going to be the next private launch to the space station. But these are 3 NASA astronauts and 1 European Space Agency astronaut launching on a SpaceX vehicle, and they're going to be there for probably 6 months. But they're launching on Saturday from Florida, which is really, really exciting. There's a lot coming up. There's a lot that's been delayed, however. The first photos that I showed you of Boeing's first try with its uncrewed flight, it's hoping to try again in May, and then hopefully in July, NASA will be launching the first mission with its Artemis program, Artemis 1. This is also uncrewed, but it's going to be the first mission to launch with NASA's new Space Launch System rocket, which is the most powerful rocket that NASA's ever built. And they would argue it's the most powerful rocket anyone's ever built. So that was originally going to launch in May as well. There have been a couple delays. Right now we're looking at July, but fingers crossed. But yeah, those are probably the biggest things on the near horizon. And then also this summer, the James Webb Space Telescope will become fully operational. All of its science instruments will be fully operational, fully turned on, and we will get to eagerly anticipate some of the earlier science data and hopefully soon the first images from Webb, which I'm very excited about personally.
What do you think of the future of our cooperation with Russia in the space program?
It's a great question. Right now it looks like, the US and Russia are going to continue cooperating basically kind of as they have as normal on the space station. NASA and Russia's space agency is separate from its military, not that it's not within its influence, but the space station is only set to last until 2030. It doesn't have that many more years left on its docket, and it would be a huge waste financially, scientifically, et cetera, for all of the nations involved. And Russia's not the only other nation on the space station. So if they were to stop collaborating on the space station, it would be a major loss to all parties involved. So, whatever happens here on the ground, or however the two agencies feel about each other with other pursuits, I think that the station collaboration will continue. But in general, Russia has cut ties with pretty much all companies that work with the US, all space companies, and most space companies that are not based in Russia, which is pretty much all space companies, have cut ties with Russia. So after the end of the space station, I'm hesitant to even say what they might be doing in space at all. I know that Russia had previously been planning to basically make their own space station with China, but I haven't heard much about that in a little while. I don't know what will happen with that now. It's really tough to say. It's a really weird situation. And while we talk about astronauts collaborating on the space station, obviously astronauts can be professionals. They can, kind of just get the job done as they are trained to do. But Russia also does things in space with its military, not its space program. I don't know if you were following space news last fall of 2021, you may have seen that Russia conducted another anti-satellite missile test in orbit, essentially detonating a missile, exploding a defunct old satellite. But they did this with a satellite that was remarkably close to the space station. So even though there were Russian cosmonauts on the station, those Russian cosmonauts are part of Russia's space agency, not its military. So they didn't really communicate about it at all. So Russia's astronauts were shocked as all of the astronauts in space had to literally duck and cover in their vehicles that were docked because there was all of these shards of debris from this missile test. And so that has continued to cause extreme conflict in low Earth orbit and with how we deal with satellites in these tests. So I don't know, it's a tough question to answer. It's kind of an only time will tell thing, but whatever collaborations could potentially grow don't seem to have that same potential anymore. I'll say that.
Thank you. What a fascinating life you lead.
It's more boring than it sounds, but I am definitely very grateful for how interesting I have been able to make it, which has been really wonderful. Ooh, what are you reading? I am not reading anything spacey at the moment, unfortunately. I have a couple space books that are next on my docket, but I just finished Delia Owens' Where the Crawdads Sing, which is science related, though it's more of a murder mystery. I just finished it and I was gobsmacked. I was floored by how incredible this book is. It's sometimes you can't tell if it's a naturalist science book, about critters that live in the swamp or if it's a murder mystery. But it really is a fascinating read, and it's fictional, but it doesn't feel fictional. It was wonderful. And no, I have not read Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield yet, but that is sitting on my table in my pile of next books to read, along with Fire and Ice, which is a nonfiction book all about volcanoes in the solar system that I'm very excited about.
Delia and her husband wrote a series of books about their time in Africa, which are really, really fascinating. Very, very interesting, lots of funny, but also poignant adventures. So they're worth pursuing.
I'll check it out. That sounds up my alley. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions or comments for Chelsea? So, So Chelsea, you said you've had your own music played in space. That's pretty cool. And from my understanding of physics, in order for music to transmit, you need air, right?
Right.
Yep.
So the music was transmitted through the air in space.
It wasn't played in the actual vacuum of space.
No.
I mean, it could have been, we wouldn't have heard it. You could toss a speaker out into the vacuum of space, you won't hear anything, nothing will happen. It could still be played,
Right.
No one will be enjoying it. Maybe the tardigrades that are having their 13 minutes of survival out there. But it was played in the cabin of the Crew Dragon, where there was air. There was.
If you're making out the groans, one of my favorite Homer Simpson quotes is, if there's no air in space, then why is there an air in space museum?
Oh my God. Oh my God. That's pretty, that's not bad. That's not bad. I'll give it to Homer.
Right on. Yeah, so I mean, again, I think someone in the audience said if you had any questions, we are a club of amateur astronomers. Actually, a funny little anecdote. Some of us do a lot of work with the public, outreach, bringing telescopes out to the public, sharing views or whatnot, giving talks. A funny story from my end is how often, just, you know, like you said, you never know what base level to start with. I always will ask the audience, you know, do you know what astronomy is? And then as we are amateur astronomers, I'll always ask, do you know what it means to be an amateur? And the best question that I ever got was someone said, well, it means you're probably not that good at it.
They're being honest with you, but
I thought it was
rude.
Yeah, maybe that comment came at the end of my talk. I thought it was a fantastic response, and I actually bring it up in the future, but, you know, I'll then kind of allow some other people to have opinions of what the term means, but it always circles back to, I just say, well, really all it means is we're not paid to do what we do. So it is awesome to talk to people that are paid to do this and to kind of merge the hobby and the vocation together.
Yep.
So again, unless there are any final questions or comments, again, Chelsea would like to thank you again.
Thank you guys for having me and letting me ramble. If you didn't feel like asking a question, but come up with one later, you can always reach out to me. You know, at my email, it's just my first and last name @gmail.com. It's not a secret. You know, feel free to ask any questions you want. But thank you all for having me and letting me talk your ears off. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a final couple of comments for those here in person. There are refreshments. I checked the weather forecast. It was supposed to be clear tonight. There is a big screaming nearly full moon, but I believe it was supposed to be only like 5% cloud cover. So if people are interested, we might be able to open a telescope. And then a final reminder that this Saturday is a Mount Cuba work day. So if anyone's looking forward to getting their hands dirty, it'd be a great opportunity to give back to Mount Cuba. So again, thanks for everybody coming out. Thanks for the people on Zoom. We'll see you all around.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Nice.
Come back anytime.
Rob, I'll let you, I don't want to screw it up.
Have a good one.
Yeah, well, I was blown away with Colin.